Listen up, we are about to get started with our 2023 Black History program entitled Stand Up, Black Resistance. Our students have worked really hard in a short amount of time to bring to you this production. Liam. I know you guys will enjoy it.
Welcome to Brookwood Junior High's Black History Month program, entitled Stand Up. 2023 stands for Black History Month and Black Resistance. We bring you today a flashback in time of Black people's resistance in the United States of America. We will chronicle how Blacks stood up to propel themselves up from slavery and into a renaissance of art and expression, and up to what we know today as the Civil Rights Movement. And finally, today's present resistance entitled Black Lives Matter. And now, please stand for our Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, sung by our gospel choir.
Black people in the United States have generationally and systematically fought against racial inequality. Black Americans' resistance to racial subjugation has deep roots in U.S. history and has taken on many forms such as slave rebellions, protest movements, creating institutions that fight against inequality, and consistently providing innovation in the arts and sciences. Black Americans have long articulated a clear vision for the kind of social change that will improve their lives. We can, we must, we will stand up. Now we will have Kaden Mondang and Tristan Davis reading on Stand Up. Armani Lewis.
Let's make a difference.
Stand up.
Let's fight resistance.
Violence don't fit, we got to resist. Protest is sick, join hands to assist. Stand up. Let's fix the wrong. Stand up.
Let's make us strong.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for the people. While the clouds roll back in the stars.
preacher who led one of the most well-known slave rebellions in history. Nat Turner was said to have had a dream that he believed came from God that inspired this rebellion. He knew that he must resist. He knew that we must stand up, even if it meant death.
I'm Monica Pearson with This Week in Black History. It was on November 11th, 1831, that enslaved preacher turned rebel leader Nat Turner was executed by hanging in Jerusalem, Virginia, for his role in organizing a slave rebellion that ended in the deaths of at least 180 people. Turner was born into slavery in Virginia on October 2nd, 1800, and learned to read and write at an early age. He was also intensely religious, preaching the Bible to fellow slaves, and even gaining the admiration of some white believers. Nat Turner was influenced by Bible verses such as, "The last shall be first, and the first shall be last," believing God was calling him to fight against the great evil of slavery. After interpreting a solar eclipse in February 1831 as the vision of a black hand reaching over the sun, Turner began conspiring with other slaves to plan an uprising. The insurrection began on August 21st as over 70 black rebels advanced from house to house in Southampton County, freeing slaves and killing slave owners, only sparing the poorest of white households. Although the rebellion was quickly defeated by state militia and over 100 black men, women, and children were killed in retaliation, Turner escaped capture for 6 weeks before he was discovered. After his death by hanging, Nat Turner's head was removed and displayed as a brutal warning to other slaves. Although strict laws were put in place in the aftermath to keep slaves illiterate, the increased national visibility of racial violence did gradually lead to debates on emancipation and improved treatment of slaves, as well as a heightened emphasis on education of former slaves in the North.
And now we will welcome Zoe Trotter to the stage, performing Bury Me a Free Land by Frances Harper.
Bury me in a free land. Make me a grave where you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. I cannot rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fearful gloom. I cannot rest if I heard the shred of a cough gang to the shambles led, and the mother's shriek of wild despair rise like a curse on the trembling air. I could not sleep if I saw the lash, drinking her blood at each fearful gash, and I saw her babes torn from her breast like trembling doves from their parent nest. I'd shudder and start if I heard the bay of bloodhounds seizing their human prey, and I heard the captive plead in vain as they bound afresh his gailing chain. If I saw young girls from their mother's arms, bartered and sold for their youthful charms, my eye would flash with a mournful flame, my death-pale cheek grow red with shame. I would sleep, dear friends, where bloated might can rob no man of his dearest right. My rest shall be calm in any grave where none can call his brother a slave. I ask no monument, proud and high, to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me now in a land of slaves.
What, child? What happened? What's wrong? Franklin, Lord have mercy. What is that man doing this time?
I think my rib is broken.
What happened?
You men ain't getting horses fed. Master said he don't appreciate his bonus being stalled, so he put a bullet in me and whipped me.
That's what I think of old Master's precious police.
Watch what you say now. He don't get that. He's a child. He'll whip your words.
Franklin knew this from experience. He was only 6 years old when he received his first beating. Now, 30 years later, Franklin carries the scars of his lifetime. Stripes upon his back from the many whip lashings, a broken jaw, a dislocated shoulder, near blind in one eye, a fractured skull, and the list goes on. In many ways, he is lucky, or some may say, unlucky to be alive.
Oh, Franklin, I just heard Master talking to Joe Wilkins. You're being sold. No! Papa, I'm not gonna let them sell you.
You have no choice.
Maybe you do.
Did you hear me say you have no choice?
I've helped you before. I can help you too. I'm a conductor. I can lead you to freedom.
Like on the railroad?
Yes.
You mean the Underground Railroad, don't you? I've heard of people like you in your organization, but we can't come with you. It's far too dangerous.
Go with her where?
Living together might be our only hope.
There's great risk.
What risk? What are we even talking about?
The Underground Railroad was not a real railroad, of course. It was a network of houses and other buildings used to help slaves escape to freedom in the northern states or Canada. This network of escape routes was described using railroad terms. Passengers were runaway slaves fleeing from the south. Their guides were called conductors, and they led them from one station to another, where fugitives would rest and eat. But slave owners did not take kindly to runaways. If a slave was discovered missing, search parties would be formed and bloodhounds assembled in order to find the missing party. If captured, slaves would be beaten severely, tortured, and even killed for their attempts.
Can it really be done, Papa? Can we really escape?
No, we'll never make it.
Like I said, I've helped many before. I can help you too.
That might be our only hope, Serena.
Okay, what do we do?
Meet me behind the door after Master's going to sleep. We'll leave tonight.
Moses is what they called her because, similar to Moses in the Bible, Harriet led her people out of bondage. In fact, she reportedly went back over 13 times, working as a conductor to help free enslaved blacks, using what was known as the Underground Railroad. And when a conductor she was, she never lost a passenger.
Up from slavery, blacks in America found themselves in a cultural revolution, free to express themselves in a variety of ways. They were encouraged to celebrate their heritage and found themselves discovering a new identity known as the New Negro. The New Negro is a term popularized during the Harlem Renaissance, implying a more outspoken advocacy of dignity and refusal to submit quietly to the practices of laws of Jim Crow and racial segregation. One of the factors contributing to the rise of the Harlem Renaissance was the migration of African Americans to the northern cities such as New York City, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. between 1919 and 1926. The Harlem Renaissance enabled African Americans to stand up and exhibit pride and control over how the black experience was represented in the American culture.
Throughout the 1920s, Harlem experienced a cultural and intellectual explosion that became known as the Harlem Renaissance. Who was involved in the Harlem Renaissance? What was the ultimate impact? Harlem is a neighborhood in New York City which has a very large African American community. Harlem became a destination for African Americans throughout the early 1900s as part of the Great Migration. As more blacks made Harlem their home, it increasingly became well known as an African American cultural center. Poets, writers, artists, musicians, and philosophers were all key parts of the movement. One of the key components of the Harlem Renaissance was music. Jazz performers including Jelly Roll Morton, Fats Waller, Duke Ellington, and Louis Armstrong perfected their music, which became very popular amongst white audiences. It was also during this era when the piano was incorporated into the jazz style of music. Traditionally, jazz bands had included primarily brass instruments. Intellectuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey argued and debated issues of racism, ethnic pride, and other topics related to African American life. Poets such as Langston Hughes introduced a new form of poetry known as jazz poetry. African American literature of the era included themes such as how slavery had impacted the African American culture and how to combat stereotypes of Black Americans. African American clothing also drastically changed during the Harlem Renaissance. Black men started wearing zoot suits. These were suits which featured long coats with padded shoulders and wide lapels. Women wore low-slung dresses, silk stockings, and open-toed slippers. Both genders wore hats with wide brims. Leopard skin items also became popular, as they were seen as a connection to traditional African garb. The Harlem Renaissance had a profound impact on the United States, as well as the world. African American artists, musicians, and writers began to be respected on an international level. Not only were white audiences listening to and enjoying Black music, but white composers and musicians began incorporating African American rhythms and harmonies into their own pieces. The Harlem Renaissance also helped to change the world's perception of African Americans. Prior to the 1920s, blacks were thought of as uneducated farmers. However, thanks to the Harlem Renaissance, a new image of sophisticated and intellectual African Americans began to emerge.
And now we bring to you Brooklyn Junior High School's Cotton Club.
Yeah.
activist, novelist, playwright, and columnist from Joplin, Missouri. One of the earliest innovations of literary art form called jazz poetry, he was best known as the leader of the Harlem Renaissance. And now we bring you the poem, Mother to Son, performed by Tiara Lowry and Tristan Davis.
Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tags in it and splinters and boards torn up in places with no carpet on the floor. There. But all the time, I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on them steps because you find just akin to hard. Don't you fall now. But I still going, honey. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
Welcome back to the Cotton Club. Famous African-American singer and band leader Cab Calloway learned the art of scat singing before landing a regular gig at Harlem's famous Cotton Club. Following the enormous success of his song, Minnie the Moocher, in 1931, Calloway became one of the most popular entertainers of the 1930s and 40s. And now we present Cab Calloway.
Here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a low-down, hoochie-coocher. She was the roughest, toughest frail. Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Hi-di, 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 ho. Hi-di, 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 ho. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Whoa.
The Harlem Renaissance instilled in African Americans across the country a new spirit of self-determination and pride, a new social consciousness, and a new commitment to political activism, all of which will provide a foundation for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Now we will have a group performing the teens who triggered the civil rights movement.
Everyone today has heard of the famous and heroic Rosa Parks. But did you know there was a girl named Claudette Colvin who took a stand against injustice and unfair practices in Alabama's busing system? Claudette Colvin was born September 5, 1939 in Montgomery, Alabama, months before Rosa Parks. Colvin stood up against segregation in Alabama in 1955 when she was only 15 years old. She also served as a plaintiff in the landmark legal case Browder versus Gill, which helped end the practice of segregation on Montgomery public buses. Why? But it's my constitutional right to sit here just as much as his. She would later tell Newsweek, I feel like Cedric Truth was pushing down on one shoulder and Harriet Tubman was pushing down on the other, saying, sit down, girl. I was losing my seat. Later, in Money, Mississippi, 14-year-old Emmett Till was visiting from Chicago. Rumors had swept through the little town of a wolf whistling, slick-talking black boy Chicago who need to learn some respect for Southern white culture. Sunday, August 28, 1955, a few miles outside of Money, Mississippi. It was after 2 a.m. when the killer's car, its headlight off, coasted to a stop on the gravel road about 15 feet from the darkened sharecropper's house. Roy Bryant and his half-brother J.W. Miller walked boldly towards the house with vengeance on their mind. Miller, the bigger of the two, carried a long flashlight in one hand and an Army-issued .45 pistol on the other. The brothers walked through the screen front porch of the Cottonville house and stopped at the door ready for action. Bryant pounded on the door. The house remained silent. He pounded again and shouted.
Who's that? All right, sir.
The door slowly swung open, and a thin African-American man, 64-year-old Moses Preacher Wright, stepped out to the porch.
Yes, sir.
Money is here.
Yes, sir.
Well, we need to talk to him.
With the flashlight casting eerie shadows through the dark house, Wright led the two white men to a bathroom where 14-year-old Emmett Bobo Till slept with 3 of his cousins. Brian shook Emmett Till awake while Miller shined a flashlight in the boy's face.
You the boy that's talking?
Yeah.
Don't say yeah to me. Go ahead.
Emmett sat up from the bed and began dressing while his great uncle Moses pleaded for him.
The boy didn't have any sins because he was raised up in Chicago. Please don't take him.
By now, the commotion had brought Emmett's great aunt Elizabeth Wright into the room, and she begged the two white men to leave Emmett alone.
Please don't take him. Please, we'll pay whatever you want to charge, please.
You best get yourself back in that bed. I want to hear those springs.
With tears in her eyes, Elizabeth Wright left the room. Emmett continued to dress oblivious to the danger that was unfolding around him. He reached for his socks when Miller stopped him.
Just a short boy, we ain't heard.
I don't work.
His kidnappers cursed him for making them wait while he pulled on his socks and shoes. When the boy was dressed, Miller and Brian pushed him through the house, out to the porch, while Moses Wright tried one more time to save his nephew.
Just take him out to the yard and I'll be satisfied.
But the two men ignored his plea. Before they stepped into the yard, Miller turned and asked Wright if they recognized him.
Recognize me?
No, sir. I don't know you.
Good. How old are you?
64.
Well, this how you see me and him every day? You won't live to see 65.
But where are you taking him?
Nope.
Moses Wright and his wife watched from the porch while the two men walked them into their car. Brian forced Emmett close to the back window and asked.
Is this the boy?
Brian shoved Emmett into the front seat, sat next to him, and pulled the door closed. Miller got behind the wheel, and the car, its lights still off, moved into the dark, taking the boy from Chicago with him. His naked and mutilated body would be found by a fisherman 3 days later in the Tallahatchie River.
The kidnapping and murder of Emmett Till and the trial of his killers became one of the biggest news of 1955. The fact that Emmett Till was from the North, a boy of only 14 years old, and his infamous open casket picture from Jet magazine would shock and galvanize the nation. The acquittal of Emmett Till's killers led to protests and condemnations from civil rights leaders. They decided they could take it no longer. 3 months later, Rosa Parks will continue the work of 15-year-old Claudette Colvin. She, like Claudette Colvin had done much prior, refused to give her seat on a Montgomery bus. Martin Luther King Jr., a powerful and charismatic speaker, emerged to lead the bus boycott. Blacks nationwide were committed to doing whatever they could to make sure equality was the law of the land. 30 years after the case, a former NAACP official said, "I think sometimes that the hand of God was in the whole thing. White men have been killing black boys down here for years without anybody making much of a fuss." The Emmett Till case had become a cog in the wheel of change. Much of the writing on civil rights history in Montgomery has focused on the arrest of Rosa Parks, another woman who refused to give up her seat on the bus. While her role in the fight to end segregation in Montgomery might have not been as widely recognized, Colvin helped advance civil rights efforts in the city. Claudette gave us all moral courage. If she had not done what she did, I am not sure we would have been able to mount the support for Mrs. Parks. Her former attorney, Fred Gray, told Newsweek, "Recognition and thanks should be given to Claudette Colvin and Emmett Till, two teens who triggered the civil rights movement."
In October 1966, Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, a pair of students in Oakland, galvanized by Malcolm X's philosophy of black self-determination, launched the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Their goal was to protect their community from racism and violence, which meant protecting it from the police.
When we first started, we had a police alert patrol, and we would patrol the community. If we saw the police brutalizing anyone, we would put an end to this. Usually the police wouldn't brutalize anyone if we were on hand.
Did the Panthers embrace a willingness to use arms to defend themselves? Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's usually the only part of the story that we get. Even more energy was expended in social programs.
The Panthers put their revolutionary philosophy into practical action. They developed programs targeted at poor black people. They provided the community with free medical care, including sickle cell screening programs, as well as clothing for the needy. Many believe that the Panthers' free breakfast program for school children helped inspire the USDA's federal breakfast program.
We were not for integration, we were for self-determination. We wanted to have the right to determine ourselves what we wanted. Economic opportunity, decent education, access to the full complement of privileges, benefits, and responsibilities of any American.
Not even the FBI was able to stop the spread of the Panthers' ideals, encouraging black people to defend themselves from police brutality and fight for their rights. Decades later, the Black Panthers' legacy continues to live in a variety of political, cultural, and social realms, most recently in the Black Lives Matter movement.
We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. Fight the power! We want full employment for our people. Fight the power! We want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black community. Fight the power! We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. Fight the power! We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want all black men to be exempt from military service. We want an immediate end to the police brutality and the murder of black people. We want freedom for all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We want all black people when brought to trial to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group or people from their black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace.
The Black Panthers Party 10-point program was a definition of standing up against injustice and police brutality and demanding equal rights. It was said to be a mixture of the Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence. And blacks fought for that independence, stood up and resisted, and finally saw the day where we inaugurated our first black president. Welcome, Barack Obama. Now, we will welcome Liam Foster performing The Hill We Climb, the poem recited at Barack Obama's inauguration.
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country at a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a nation that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but to what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm for none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That's a promise to Glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the path we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. And this truth, and this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared at its inconception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it, we find the power to offer a new chapter, to offer ourselves hope and laughter. So while we once asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move on to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction in the narrative will be the inheritance of a new generation. Become the future. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. In every known nook of our nation, and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, We step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn bellows as we set it free. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
Resistance, stand up. Sing with me. Our kids work hard. Open the curtains for me, guys. Yeah. Oh, God, I'm trying to give you your flowers. Y'all left. It's cool. They did a great job. Guys, give them a round of applause. That concludes our Black History program for 2023. Few words from the principal.
I want to personally thank Ms. Hall and Ms. Mitchell for putting on a great performance with help from Mr. Canning, Ms. Adams, Ms. Williams, all the way down to our custodial staff. So thank you to everyone that pitched in. Most importantly, I want to thank the kids. It's very hard to get up here in front of your peers and do this. And for them to be able to do that has so much talent. So great job to our students. And thank you to our parents for your support in raising these fine young individuals. The best thing about Brookwood Junior High is we have the most talented kids, and you saw that here today. Some of them, I think, were born in the wrong era because at Minnie the Moocher and one last thing. On Tuesday at our pep assembly, supposedly I forgot to thank the cheerleaders. So thank you, cheerleaders. We're going to head back to your SEL period where we release from there. I know we got a few late